Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. For this month's Birds Notes program, we're going to get an update on Vermont's endangered common tern population. Joining us from the Audubon Center in Huntington is bird expert and conservation biologist Mark Labar. Thank you so much for being with us, Mark.
Always great to be here, Fran.
So, common terns are near and dear to your heart, Mark, right?
They are indeed. They are indeed. I've been working with the terns on Lake Champlain, with support from the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department now for 30 plus years. So it's been a great experience for me every summer, getting in the boat, going out to the islands, checking on the birds, seeing how they're doing, ups and downs. But overall, the birds have been doing pretty good.
So where is it that you go? Where do they nest?
So common terns nest on a few rocky islands. Here's a nice shot of a common tern, black cap, red bill with the black tip. Very graceful in the air, and they nest on a couple of small islands in the inland sea, east of, the Champlain Islands and up around the Swanton, Swanton, St. Albans border. This island here. Go ahead, Fran.
North Hero, up in the North Hero area, right?
Yeah. And this island here is, the one that's most regularly used. That's Papa Squash Island. And you can see a lot of the terns and gulls that nest there flying around over the island. It's small, maybe the size of a footprint of a house. We put buoys up around it. Here's a nice shot of a common tern. They kind of make a mess of my buoys by the end of the summer, but it keeps humans from getting too close and disturbing the birds while they're up there. At any given time, we can have, 100, 150 pairs of common terns nesting there and throw in another 200 pairs of ring-billed gulls. So very tight spaces and a very busy place.
Yeah, it's a very small little island. So where on the island do they nest? And if they're also sharing this with gulls, how does that work?
Yeah, so, one thing I wanted to point out is all of these islands, Rock Island, Grandma's Island, and Papa Squash, just recently got declared critical habitat by the state of Vermont, a new law that went into effect. And common terns nest on the ground. They take advantage of, the grassy areas and the open areas. Papa Squash Island has no vegetation on it other than grass. And this is a common tern nest. They lay 2 to 3 eggs. This nest is actually fairly well developed. Sometimes they just nest right on the bare ground. And you can see one of our tags there off to the right. That's how we keep track of it. Terns will incubate, both the male and the female incubate the eggs. And so it takes roughly 3 weeks, maybe a little bit more, for the chicks to hatch.
So what are those structures that are there? It doesn't look like they're using them to put the eggs in. I mean, the eggs seem quite exposed, but what are those little structures for?
Right. So those structures are called chick shelters. And so once the chicks hatch, we put these shelters out next to all of the nests, and you can see all the terns out there. And that gives the chicks a place to go in inclement weather, or if there's predation by great horned owls. It's basically a place to hide when the vegetation isn't as thick as it can be later in the season. So this is, like the buoys, another one of our management techniques that we use to help this endangered species.
Yeah, it's like a little village there. It's pretty adorable.
It is. And we often, when we're surveying, lift up those shelters and the chicks are tucked right underneath there.
So what are other natural predators besides the owls?
So owls are a big one. We sometimes have problems with black-crowned night herons. Will come in at night and eat the chicks and eggs. We've had problems over the years with mink coming up. Because you have all these birds concentrated in one spot, it becomes a good place for other species to find meals for their young as well. So we try to keep that at a minimum so the terns have some success on the islands.
Wow, so the minks swim there. So do you have help with your work?
I do. Fortunately, Audubon over the past couple of years has been able to bring on a number of conservation interns, and they come up on the islands with me, as well as volunteers now and again, to help me search and mark the nests, as well as keep track of the chicks. This year, Thomas Patty and Grace Yaros were our two interns. And you can see we're well prepared there. We had concerns with avian flu coming in this year. So we wore masks up on the islands just because we wanted to keep ourselves protected. And you can see those hard hats. And this is what, a little tern chick looks like fresh out of the egg. You can see the feathers are still wet. The white tip on its bill is the egg tooth that it uses to break out of the shell. And, the terns, they hatch asynchronously so that they'll hatch over the course of 2 or 3 days. And oftentimes the first chicks do pretty well. The third chick is kind of an insurance policy. In years where there's good food and everything like that, all three might make it. In years where there's predation and food sources might be low, we may only get one chick per nest off.
Huh. So would the parents like not feed the third or fourth depending on what's going
Yeah,
on?
the first two that hatch are bigger, and they get birds. Common terns feed their chicks fish. They eat fish, and so they'll bring the fish back whole. So the bigger chicks are able to access that food item as they come in.
And then also with your help and when you're out there, it's pretty dangerous for you guys too, right?
Yeah, it can be. I mentioned the avian flu, but you probably saw the hard hats that Grace and Thomas were wearing. Um, yeah, hard hats are kind of requirement because, terns can be very aggressive. I have many bumps on the top of my head from getting struck by terns. They'll take that bill and they'll put it right into the top of your head to protect their eggs and chicks. And so hard hats are a requirement during the breeding season.
Yikes. And do you know how many chicks survive each year? I think I remember last year was not a good year for them. So how does that work and how did it go this year?
So we'll band each one of the chicks, and by putting that metal band on with a unique number, we can keep track of them over the course of the summer. And that way, when the chicks reach about 15 days, it takes them about 3 weeks to get to the point where they can fly. We'll consider them having survived, and we'll add them to our chick list. Last year, we did have a tough time. Peregrine falcon sat on Papa Squash Island for a whole month. This is a chick once it's got a little bit bigger. This is maybe 7, 8 days old, and you can see they're really cryptically colored. But this year we did really well. The terns regained some of their population numbers and got up to about 180 pairs, and we probably got 125, 140 chicks off this year, compared to only 26 chicks that got off last year. So it takes terns 2 to 4 years, 2, 3 years to get mature to come back to the breeding islands. And so 2 years ago, we had a really good year. So hopefully these young birds will start coming into the population and continue to have those adult breeding numbers increase.
So are you meeting your goals? You've been doing this for a couple of decades.
Yeah.
How does it look over that really long period of time?
So when I started, when I was way back when I was 23, there were 50 pairs on Lake Champlain. And the population now is up to it. Prior to last year, had been up above 200 pairs, which is the number we're looking for in order to downlist them from endangered to threatened. Because the chick survival can vary between years, we haven't taken that step yet at the state level. But hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll be able to take them off the endangered species list and have them just be listed as threatened in the state.
Terrific. And let's go back to the avian flu piece. How is that affecting other birds on Lake Champlain? There's a real problem with the eagles. We lost some eagles. What more do we know over the course of the summer about the problem with avian flu?
You know, other than the eagles, I haven't heard too much that it's impacted, but I have heard seabird populations in Europe and on the U.S. coast, including terns, have been hit by avian flu. So since our population is kind of isolated from everybody, the coastal population and the Great Lakes population, we seem to have avoided that at this point. But there is a little bit of concern that as these birds leave the breeding grounds and go and begin to start hanging out with terns from all over North America, that may be a problem. We'll have to wait till next year to see how that impacts the population.
And then quickly, for your critical habitat designation, that means people can't land on that island unless they're researchers like you.
Yeah, so we have a permit through Vermont Fish and Wildlife to go up and do the work and do the banding. They've supported the common tern work as well as, eagle work, peregrine work, loon work for many years to keep these species present on the Vermont landscape. And that critical habitat designation is basically like, an endangered species piece for the actual nesting islands.
Right.
And so those have additional protection now because of that designation.
Perfect. And we have one last quick picture of you.
Yeah, I threw this in there as much for the tern, but I saw it and I had memories of my mustache. So this is a juvenile tern. This is a couple years ago. You can see it's just about to fledge. It's growing in a lot of its, basic or first year plumage. There's still some tufts of some of that juvenile plumage. But I go back through my pictures. It's been so long. I've got some, I have various plumage characteristics over the years, let's just say.
It's a beautiful thing, Mark. And if you have a bird-related question, you can pass it along to Mark at the address on your screen, mlabar@audubon.org. He will answer any questions you have. Send a photo, send a question, and we'll talk about it in an upcoming version of Bird Notes. Mark, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Always great to be here, Fran. Great talking to you.
And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.